Hi everyone, and welcome to the Cook with Janie kitchen. Here I am today celebrating my Canadian heritage with a fabulous recipe, and it is real Canadian blueberry muffins. Now let me explain to you what a Canadian muffin is, as opposed to what you have been, possibly if you live in England or the UK, what you've been buying in shops and cafes. That's much more like a cake texture, whereas muffins in the true Canadian sense are actually really tender, and they have a different texture than cakes. The mixture is much less mixed. It's a really subtle difference, but absolutely wonderful. And I'm so pleased that I am actually able to share with you my real Canadian muffins video. So what I'm going to do today is make these for you, and I have to tell you, I learned this recipe when I was about maybe 12 or 13. It was one of the things that I cooked earliest in my life in terms of cooking and baking, and so nice to be able to share it with you. Blueberry muffins are really easy. So it looks like a long list of ingredients. It's actually very simple. Dry ingredients and wet ingredients, very easy to mix up together. So you've got 120 grams fresh or frozen blueberries. You've got a tablespoon of organic strong white flour. There is a way you can make these gluten-free, and you could use at that point 2 teaspoons of coconut flour instead. So that should be an or on that line, and oh, it is. Thank you, John. And 220 grams of organic strong white flour for the muffins themselves, or you can use 50 grams of coconut flour. Coconut flour is very different from ordinary wheat flour because it absorbs a lot more liquid for its volume, so you don't need so much. And 50 grams of butter or coconut oil, and you've got 100 grams of unrefined cane sugar, and 3 teaspoons of baking powder, half a teaspoon of fine sea salt or pink Himalayan salt, a large egg and a large egg white, 140 grams of the milk of your choice, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. So to make this gluten-free, you're going to use the coconut flour at the beginning when you add your blueberries, and you're going to use your coconut flour for the muffin batter, if you can call it that, the muffin mixture, and you're going to use gluten-free baking powder. For dairy-free, use coconut oil to grease your muffin tin, and use coconut oil in the recipe, and any dairy-free milk of your choice. So it's a really flexible recipe, and that's quite surprising because when I was taught it, I was taught, ooh, you must do this, this, and this, and mix it exactly this way. So you can do this by hand if you wish, or you can do it in your Thermomix. It took me years to perfect the Thermomix method, and I'm really delighted to be able to share it with you here today. So here we go. I'm just going to go to the scales on my Thermomix TM6, and I'm going to place a bowl on top of the Thermomix lid, and I'm going to add to it a tablespoon of strong white flour. So there we are, and I've got my blueberries here, and I'm going to add in, hang on a sec, go to 0, 120 grams of blueberries. These ones are fresh because it is blueberry season right now, and actually I have a few growing in the garden, but it is just a few, and I'm competing with the birds, so I'm not sharing any with my blueberry muffins. We're eating those ones fresh, but I got these lovely ones from the shops. And if you want to see, this blueberry here is actually really sort of a light reddy purple instead of a dark bluey purple, and that means it's slightly underripe. Don't worry about using those ones in your blueberry muffins. They'll be full of extra acidity and therefore extra flavor. Lovely to see you all coming on. Thank you very much for joining me today. It's great to have you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stir the flour onto these blueberries, and what this does is it helps your blueberries not to sink. Some of them will stay near the top of your muffins, which is great. Totally perfect. And I'm just going to put those over here for a moment because we don't need those just yet. And let's tuck that underneath here. And here we go with the ingredients into the Thermomix. So we're going to put in our flour. And you've seen me using the scales already today. It's 220 grams of strong white flour. This is actually white spelt flour here today, which is the equivalent of a strong white flour. And that means you've got some flexibility. You can use what you've got in your cupboard if you've got one of those and not the other. So now I'm going to add my, my butter. So it's 50 grams of butter. And you could use 50 grams of coconut oil instead, as I mentioned, if you want it to be dairy-free or if that's all you have. So here we go, 30, 50, 52. That'll do nicely. There we are. And I'm just going to pause here and tell you, you should be preheating your oven to 200 degrees centigrade without the fan, 180 degrees with the fan, 350 degrees Fahrenheit, if you're in North America and you've got a Fahrenheit oven, and gas 4, or you can actually use the AGA roasting oven, preheated if you have one that you have to heat up. And you also need to prepare your muffin tin. So I've saved my butter paper actually. This is the paper that the butter was wrapped in, and I actually just used that. I know it sounds funny on the video, but I've just used it to rub the butter around each of these muffin cups so that they're nicely greased. And they are now ready for me. Pop that there, and I'll put that away. And then we are prepped. That's our getting ready to do the muffins. And I'll go back to where I am now. I've got the flour and the butter in. I'm going to add my sugar, which is 100 grams. If you have a really sweet tooth, you can go up to 110, or if you don't have much of a sweet tooth, then you can go down to 80 grams. So let's just see here. I think we're around 100 here. That'll do. 103. And then I'm going to add my baking powder. Now this is gluten-free baking powder. It's really easy to make. So if you look at my chocolate book, there is a recipe for gluten-free baking powder in I Love Thermomix, I Love Chocolate. So very easy. I always make my own, and then I know for sure it's gluten-free. Most baking powders are gluten-free. Read the label if you need gluten-free. So I'm adding 3 teaspoons, and this is half a tablespoon or 1.5 teaspoons here. So there we are. That's the equivalent of 3 teaspoons of baking powder. And now I'm just going to mix that all up together so it crumbs the butter into the flour and baking powder. So here we go with the lid on. You can do that by hand if you want to, with a fork and or with your fingers to rub it in. But this is a really nice way to get it lightly done. So say goodbye to the scales, and we're just going to go to turbo, which is one of our settings. Where is my turbo? Here it is. On the mode screen on your Thermomix. So what I've got here is I've got a choice. So I can actually do 1 second. Hang on a sec. Where's my turbo for seconds here?
Slide it across.
There it is, half a second. I just want half a second pulses because my butter has gone really soft because I got it ready earlier. Earlier it took me about 10 or 12 pulses. So I'm just going to turn that to the turbo setting and pulse here. 3, 4, 5, 6, and because the butter's so soft, I'm just actually going to check and have a look here. And in order to do that, you have to go back to the home screen. So, yep, that looks like really nicely crumbed in. So John is just getting the mirror ready to show you in the bowl here. And hopefully the light stays on the mirror. And there we are. It's lovely. It might just look on the video to you as if it's just flour, but the butter is beautifully evenly crumbed through. this is one of the reasons why Thermomix is so good at making pastry as well. So what I'm going to do next is add my wet ingredients. So if you were doing that by hand in a bowl, you would have made sure that your butter is all crumbed through the flour, baking powder and sugar, and then you would add your wet ingredients all at once. And I've got milk here. I've got 140 grams of milk. It's pre-weighed, so I'm just going to pour it in for you. And I've got a whole egg and 1 egg white. There we are. Put those ones out of the way. And then I'm going to add my vanilla. Now, for an interesting science experiment, for those of you who had children at home, if they're making this, get them to add the vanilla, the teaspoon of vanilla, to the milk. Because what they'll see is that the milk will sour. It's like adding lemon juice to your milk, and it'll go all curdled, which is actually quite lovely to see. It's a bit funny, and it takes about probably 3 or 4 minutes to happen, so it's worth looking at. It's a great science experiment to see that. So now what we've got is we've got everything in that's our wet ingredients, and we're just going to mix that on the kneading setting. So back to the modes again, and I'm going to knead, which is the blade of wheat picture on your Thermomix, and I'm just going to do that for 12 seconds. Now you might think this is quite accurate. It is. It's 3 kneads. So here we go. So when you're kneading with your Thermomix, you're kneading and resting. Or it's like stirring and folding in a bowl. So now I can just go back to my home screen again and take the lid off and show you that I've got sort of a lumpy batter here. And that's actually, it's got a little bit of the floury powder up the sides of the bowl. And I'm going to mix that in with my spatula. And then I'm going to add this, so just a couple of turns, and then I'm going to add this to my bowl of floured blueberries. So let me just move this out of the way. I'll pop that there. And literally this is going to be stirred together. You can see it doesn't have to be perfectly mixed at this point, and this is part of what gives the muffins their tenderness, is this very gentle mixing. And if you've got lots of dough or batter or whatever you want to call it, muffin mixture, left on your Thermomix blades there, then what you can do is just stick it back on the Thermomix and flick it off to the side just by going to speed 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever you happen to go to. It doesn't need a time. You can hear that flick off the blades there really easily. Now this recipe is just so wonderful. I can't tell you how gorgeous our kitchen has been smelling this morning. It is just lovely. So let me show you what happened to the mixture. The blades look almost totally clean. And then after this, I will use the pre-clean setting on my Thermomix to just wash out almost all of the dough. And well, actually it does wash out all of the dough. And it's really easy just to brush it clean in the sink after that. And what I've got out of the Thermomix bowl by doing that extra flicking is I've probably got an extra half a muffin. So it's well worth doing. And now what I'm going to do is, John, if you can hold the mirror up, I'm just going to fold this, and then you'll be able to see what kind of gentle stirring I'm doing. So you can see if you look that there is, yep, that's it. Working? Yep. There's a little bit of floury mixture on the top, and there's also all the flour that was around the blueberries. And I'm just literally stirring that gently in. The flour doesn't all have to disappear, but make sure you go across the bottom once or twice. And literally that was just a few mixes. So now what I'm going to do is put it into my muffin tins. And I've got that all prepared, as I showed you with the buttering earlier. And I'm just going to spoon it in so that each of the muffin cups is about 3/4 full. This makes about 12. The reason that I do 12 from this mixture is because when my children were small, they all wanted to have 2 or 3 muffins, and they didn't care whether they were big or small. They just wanted the number of muffins, the most that they were allowed to have. So I would divide this mixture out so it actually was more practical to get lots of muffins out of it. And if you want bigger muffins, you're very welcome to put the more muffin mixture into, say, about 9 of these cups, and that works well too. So, and if you want to make half a dozen, as I did this morning, then you can also do that and have a little bit extra left over for a small cake. So John, you were going to ask.
I have to say, every muffin I've had in Canada has been massive, and they're usually about twice the size of these.
I know. Yeah. There is another blueberry muffin recipe that you can see. If you've got my latest version of I Love Chocolate, I Love Thermomix, which is the bright pink recipe book behind me, then you'll be able to have a look at the chocolate and blueberry muffins, and they are delicious too. So obviously you can change the berries in this if you want, so that can give you a bit of variety. And you can put chocolate in, as that recipe does, chocolate chips, and you can leave the berries out if you want to and just have a plain muffin, depending on who wants what in your family. You can also, if you're taking these, if you're going to transport them somewhere, you can also use little muffin lining papers, or you can use these other pre-folded or make your own little muffin cases. I got these ones actually pre-folded from Waitrose, and that was really easy because I could just use them. So now your muffins are ready to pop in the oven, and you'll notice that I actually got 11 muffins, and so there's one empty hole. So what I'm going to do before I put that in the oven is half fill that empty hole because it's buttered. I don't want it to burn onto the tin in that hole. So I'm going to just add a little bit of water, halfway filled, and then that will actually be fine to bake like that. And I want to show you what I baked earlier. So out of the same mixture this morning, I baked half a dozen muffins in the brown paper case. The sides come up higher, so you can actually make that one about a Canadian size for John.
Thank you.
Or you can make them normal muffin size like this. And you can see they've risen up slightly around the edge of the tin, and that's why you butter them. And that's the muffin in a paper lining. These are great for lunch boxes, or if you're taking them on a picnic, or if you're going to take them to a friend's house or something and give them away. And I actually had a small, I only have the one big 12-cup muffin tin, and I have a half a dozen cup muffin tin. So I made those 6, and I had a bit of mixture left over, and I lined the base with paper of my grandmother's little cake tin. It's a little wee cake tin that she used to make her fruit cakes in, and my elderly auntie Janie, after whom I'm named, gave me that cake tin. And here we have a little miniature cake. So you've got all sorts of options here. And John, you have a question.
Well, I'm just going to suggest we take that little cake round to our new neighbour.
Ah, excellent idea. Yes, I know a small girl who will be very interested in that. So yes, of course you can make these by hand, but I love the fact that I can make them easily in my Thermomix now. It does all the weighing for me, and the mixing gently, and the measuring, and it's super easy, and it cleans itself. So
I was going to suggest that, do you want to show them the page in the chocolate book, Janie?
Sure, yeah. So this is the book that I was talking about. I Love Chocolate, I Love Thermomix. It's available on our website, and actually if you subscribe to the website, you get a 20% discount when you buy a copy of this book. And John, can you tell me what the code is for the 20% discount?
Well, if they subscribe, the code will be sent to them, and it'll be valid certainly till the end of July.
Okay, excellent, good. And I've got the page marked for these chocolate and blueberry muffins, and that's it there, so you can see that they are beautiful. Of course, they're even more beautiful because a chocolatier did those ones. So that is chocolate and blueberry muffins. You've got the recipe now for real Canadian blueberry muffins with a perfect Thermomix method, and I hope you really enjoy these. And
do you want to tell them what our next 2 Canadian recipes are in this Canada week?
sure. Tomorrow I'm doing smoked salmon, because of course that's a very Canadian ingredient, and that's a smoked salmon pate. It's a really simple recipe. And then on Thursday I'm doing Nanaimo bars. Now, Nanaimo bars you may never have heard of. It's a wonderful dessert. So I hope that you'll be able to enjoy those with me, and I look forward to seeing you at 1 o'clock UK time on Facebook Live tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, July 1st and 2nd. Thanks everyone for coming on. Bye.